Welcome back. All right, so news of the day for all you fine people for your Sunday, May the 28th. And we've got some news from all around the hockey world. There may not be an NHL game on tonight, but there's definitely some hockey being played. So Christian Rubens is now a hero in Latvia. He scores at 122 of overtime against the Americans, and it is a 4-3 win. I believe 4-3 win in overtime for Latvia. The score is not all that important. What's important is Latvia gets a bronze medal. So this is one of those situations where I think it's great for the country. It's great for hockey in that country. And kudos to them. And of course, from a Canuck fan perspective, it's nice to see Silovs have a really good tournament. And we'll see whether or not that translates to National Hockey League success as well. The example I would look to is Kevin Lankinen and how he played well internationally. And now he's a pretty solid NHL goaltender in his own right. So maybe that'll happen with Silovs as well. Maybe the Latvian team going to the bronze medal will mean NHL teams pay attention to some of those players. We've seen that before. Players have a really good world championship, end up getting signed to an NHL contract. Teams give them a shot. We'll see if that happens coming out of this. So this is an interesting way of looking at things. So I saw this online today and I thought, we really haven't talked about that aspect. At least I haven't on the channel. Paul Maurice, it was March the 29th that Paul Maurice was yelling at the Florida Panthers behind the bench during that game against Toronto. After the game, he said he only wished he could have yelled more. There was a lot of cursing, a lot of screaming, and I remember people at the time saying, see, he's not made for this job anymore. You can't coach that way. You can't be screaming and yelling at the players. That just doesn't work. And now they're in the Stanley Cup final. And it's felt like since that took place, things got better for Florida. They did end up making the playoffs. And through most of the season, that looked like it might happen, but they were going to need some help. And then they got that help, of course, Pittsburgh losing against Chicago and everything. But yeah, they're in the final, and it goes to show how quickly these things can turn around, right? Like all of a sudden now, I see all these articles and all these posts about Florida being the model organization. And 2 months ago, no one was saying that. And now it's, well, because they're on this run. So it goes to show how unpredictable things can be in hockey and how some teams just they make it click. And with the Florida Panthers and Matthew Tkachuk, and then you've got Vegas with Jack Eichel. In Dallas, I would say Jason Robertson's had quite the turnaround. I'm going to do a video at some point soon on players that aren't well regarded when it comes to playoff hockey who may end up proving their critics wrong, which players often do. And again, I've talked about this before. I remember Sakic being questioned, Yzerman being questioned. I'm old enough to remember people saying the Oilers wouldn't win a Stanley Cup because they don't play defense, and then they won 5. So really, this idea that we have this fine line between the winners and the losers, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I know that it's easy to dunk on certain teams, but those teams can turn things around. We have seen that before. So that brings me to the next topic I wanted to discuss. There's doctored footage out there. I saw it yesterday on Twitter, and I'm like, seriously? So it's the bit that they used to do on Coach's Corner. So Don Cherry would bring in the top prospects, the guys who are going to be the top draft picks, and talk to them. There's a moment in that segment where Matthews and Laine kind of smirk at one another. There's also a moment in that where Matthew Tkachuk talks about patterning his game after Corey Perry and the way that Corey Perry plays hockey. The video has been edited to make it look like he's talking about Corey Perry and how he models his game after that, and that Matthews and Laine look at each other like, loser. And that's how they make it look. That is not how it takes place. And so if you see that footage and you're like, oh, see, this is why the Leafs aren't any good, that's absolutely false. That's not what happened at all. If that had happened back then, everybody would have talked about it. That's the thing that I find interesting is that people are like, oh, look at this. This is awful. If that had happened in 2016 before the draft, everybody would have talked about it. So the idea that this footage has just shown up now and look at this. Yeah, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. So that's doctored video. I wanted to mention it in here because, again, I don't like seeing people get duped. I understand the urge to dunk on the Toronto Maple Leafs and all that, but I mean, really, you don't have to have fake footage out there or something that's doctored to make them look bad. And again, Matthews is one of those players that I think at some point in time in his career will prove the doubters wrong. There are definitely, I think, some changes that can be made to Toronto to make them, more likely to win a Stanley Cup and to go further in the playoffs. But it really gets overblown, this idea that, well, that there isn't the depth. They have the depth. There isn't the toughness. They out-hit their opponents a lot in the playoffs. So, and at any rate, that's a whole video for another time. But I wanted to mention that if you see that Matthews line A smirk after Tkachuk talks about Perry, that's doctored. That's not the way that happened at all. So the final starts next Saturday. So for anybody who didn't watch last night's recap, there might be a few Vegas fans, or maybe some fans who didn't really care about what happened in that Vegas game against Dallas. But yeah, the Stanley Cup final will take place next Saturday. It does not matter if it finishes in 6 or in 7. So we'll start next Saturday, either in Dallas or in Vegas, because Florida does not have home ice advantage, which is fine. They haven't needed home ice advantage because they're so darn good on the road. And so we'll see how things turn out with the series between Vegas and Dallas. And of course, then the argument of rest versus rust, and whether they're going to look nice and rested or Florida's going to look rusty. And that's a whole topic for another time as well. So Elliot Friedman, in reporting on what's going on around the coaching circles, says John Hynes may not be the coach for Nashville. He hasn't been given that assurance, and that they are looking externally, but it's kind of vague the way that it's put as well. So we'll see if there's clarity on that soon. Also reporting that Peter Laviolette could be the next coach for the New York Rangers, and that could be announced over the next week. Laviolette, of course, one of those coaches who has bounced around the league a bit, but he has a good resume. He's won before, and the Rangers, of course, looking to keep the winning ways going, stay in the playoffs, and they're looking to get over the hump and win their first cup since '94. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there and if Laviolette ends up being coach. He's also reporting that the Pittsburgh Penguins want Dubas as the general manager, and it's up to him. So they're in Monaco for the F1 race, and when they get back, the likelihood is that then they'll talk to him and see where he's at. So if Dubas wants to run the Pittsburgh Penguins as the general manager, apparently it's his choice. We'll see what he ends up doing. I think he'll go for it. I think he'll want to try it and take on that challenge. It is a challenge in Pittsburgh because you have players who are older, have very high salaries, and you have a team that really probably needs to get a bit younger and a little more skilled throughout their lineup. And it's a challenge to make that happen when you don't have the draft capital and you don't have those top-notch prospects coming up, because Pittsburgh has been in win-now mode for so long. They really haven't had that youngster who's coming up who can be the next Crosby. They haven't had those draft picks. So we'll see if that changes if Dubas takes over. So ECHL playoffs I wanted to mention as well. Don't worry, I'm not forgetting this. I'll come back to it. Idaho. The Idaho Steelheads are awaiting the winner of the Florida Everblades and the Newfoundland Growlers. So the series is tied at 2, and Game 5 is today in Newfoundland. So all the best to the Growlers, of course, because I do have 2 Growlers jerseys. I have this one, and then I have the word mark that was in Leafs colors that was really limited edition, that people online were like, I don't want it. And I'm like, I'll get it. There's, I think, 299 of them made. So, yeah, Idaho's awaiting the winner. I, of course, will be rooting for Newfoundland, but the Florida Everblades, why not have another Florida team looking for another championship? Seems fine. In fact, for this video, I thought it would be fun to wear my Orlando jersey, but then I was like, no, Newfoundland's fighting for a chance to get into the final, so I might as well wear Newfoundland since it's a game day and all. Now, there's no game today in the Memorial Cup. Yesterday, the Seattle T-Birds, Peterborough Petes were put in their place. Seattle wins 6-3 and continues that run they've been on for a while now. They just looked so good against Winnipeg. I'm not entirely surprised at them beating Peterborough 6-3. And tomorrow, big game, battle for first place in the Memorial Cup. The Seattle Thunderbirds against the Quebec Remparts. So both teams that have had a win in their first games going at it, meaning the following day, we'll get Peterborough playing against Kamloops. And of course, for Kamloops being the host city, really got to fire themselves up and try to get that win there, because then their last opponent will be the Seattle Thunderbirds. And like I said, Peterborough saw just how tough they are. And Kamloops would know Seattle, So we'll see how it goes from there. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And if you want to watch the gold medal game between Canada and Germany, it starts at, I think it's 10:20 a.m. my time, which is 1:20 p.m. Eastern. So go ahead and tune in if you have a chance. I know it's on TSN in Canada. I'm not sure about elsewhere. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.